Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, Alaska's pipeline to the future, delivering oil today, sustaining operations for tomorrow, committed to safety, operating the 800-mile Trans-Alaska Pipeline since 1977.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm Meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 20th of March. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information at weather.gov/Alaska or go to arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line, of course, is open for you at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And after this show, you can find the complete broadcast on alaskapublic.org. On the right-hand side of the screen, scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see one of our shining faces there at some point. If you go to YouTube as well, you can search for AKWX TV. You can find the complete broadcast that way. Or go to the NWS Anchorage channel and get an early sneak peek of what's going on by the mid-afternoon hours. A map review of the next couple days, as well as a current look at what's going on across the state, will be available there at about 3:45 to around 4 o'clock each afternoon. Hazardous weather, we have none. Everything that we saw across southeast, across south central, and the west now has expired. So instead of talking about stuff that's actually going on at the moment, we want to tell you about something that's coming your way in about a week. About this time next week, in the morning hours, we're going to test the tsunami warning system for the entire state. And when you hear that tsunami warning, granted that there actually could be something going on at that time and we wouldn't run the test if that was the case, but most likely, chill, it's just a drill. Thursday, March 27th, 10:15 will be when we test that tsunami warning system. You may see something on your TV screen, you may hear something on the radio, you may even see something on your computer or cell phone. Again, just to remember, it is a drill, and it's a good time to review what you would do in case there is an actual tsunami alert or warning for your area. Then at 1:36, stay tuned for the Alaska Shakeout. That is when we will commemorate the quake from 50 years ago, the Great Alaska Quake there that rattled a large part of South Central, of course. Remember that it is always a good time to review how you are prepared. And if you're not prepared, today is a great day to start getting prepared, as the next big thing could be just around the corner tomorrow. Here's a look at the Bering Sea now, and as far as big things go, high pressure is in charge of most of Alaska. With that, we've got a lot of dry air sweeping out to sea. We're just crushing the clouds across the eastern and southern parts of the Bering. We have storm systems on the south side of that, trying as hard as they can to chip away at the southern periphery of that high pressure system. But that is going to keep the storm track well to our south. So as of this point, high pressure is keeping things pretty dry and clear across most of the state. The active weather remains across the Aleutians and across the Central Gulf as those storms continue to die out, one right after the other. As you look at the satellite picture across the 49th, you can see southeast saw pretty dry weather today, maybe a spot of rain or so dropping across extreme southern parts of southeast. A storm system working into the Gulf here will probably fall apart in the coming days. You can see high pressures destroying the clouds across south and west, the lower and the middle Yukon. A lot of this is just cool air showing up on the satellite picture, and you can see some of the clouds working their way into the coastal plain, but a lot of this is peeling apart as well. We've got cloud cover stretching from Adak out toward Atka and the western Bering Sea, wrapping into the north side of that storm system. This is along an occlusion right here, so we've seen some pockets of rain and snow with that, also around Unalaska into the southern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. But by and large, it has been a pretty dry day across just about every corner of Alaska. It's really only the corners that are seeing a whole lot of cloud cover at this point, or any active weather. And again, none of that seems to be severe by our measure. Here's a look at the weather map now. High pressure sitting up across the northern parts of the Yukon at 1,045 millibars, centered up right under the weather legend here. That helps us understand what's going on when we drop those symbols on, like the 2 dots here, of course. That means some light rain across the eastern chain and parts of the Alaska Peninsula. Here's low pressure at 1,005 millibars, another wave of that at 988 millibars. Both of these frontal boundaries are occluding, meaning that the cold air is running in over the warm air. And in this case, it looks like we've got some cloud cover out ahead of it, but things really settle down across the central and eastern parts of the Gulf, and we've got a lot of clear, dry air across a good part of Alaska at this point. So we're seeing the very bright white spots. That is snow cover, of course, across the Chugach, the Talkeetnas, the Alaska Range, and all the way down toward the Wrangell, St. Elias, and the Coastal Range. As you look at tonight, we've got a lot of dry weather across the Yukon, Tanana Valley, so it's probably going to be pretty crisp for some areas. The ridge of high pressure extends right over the Seward Peninsula. Don't be surprised to run into some pockets of fog in those areas as the air is very still. Low pressure pushes that frontal boundary a little bit north of the Aleutians for the central and western chain. That drops to 999 millibars. For areas around Kodiak Island and the southern tip of the Seward Peninsula, you may run into some brief areas of snow. Most of that seems to be pretty light. Elsewhere, scattered areas of rain and snow all the way up through the Pribilovs and back toward the eastern side of Russia and the Kamchatka Peninsula. For southeast, a few spotty areas of snow showers are possible. It does not look to be very sizable. The main core of any moisture is still attached to the front at 1,006 millibars. This frontal boundary will likely start to fall apart as we get into Friday, and it does so, keeping the best chance for a lift and moisture very close to the coastline. Places like Heidelberg may be looking at an opportunity for some rain and snow, and perhaps Ketchikan and Annette, though a lot of that will probably stay out to your west. And the wraparound precipitation will also reach Kodiak Island. Some pockets of snow possible for you as we wrap up the week, with high pressure still sitting very close to Fort Yukon at 1,038 millibars. It's weakened somewhat from what we're expecting for tomorrow, but it's still pretty dry, and it's still a very stable air mass across the interior and the YK Delta and Norton Sound. So expect sunshine in Nome and in Bethel and in Grath and Tanana and every place in between. It looks like a beautiful day for Friday. Enjoy your spring sunshine there. Now, if you're in the Alaska Range or the Aleutians, you're still going to be unsettled. It looks like the breezes may come up a little bit there for Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, Nikolsky, and Sand Point, but it doesn't look like it's going to be terribly strong. Perhaps some gales in the area around Shelikof Strait and westward, but again, it doesn't look like a terribly big wind coming your way. There may still be some pockets of rain and snow out across the western part of the chain. Most of the Bering looks to be reasonably dry, the northern coast, as well as Kotzebue Sound. We'll see a few more clouds, probably mostly cloudy in Barrow and Wainwright and Kotzebue, but you're talking about a mainly dry air mass at this point. So short of a flurry, things look to be pretty dry across the north and across the interior and across most of south central, until you get across some of the southern coastal areas, including Kodiak Island, the Aleutians, the Alaskan Peninsula, and maybe the far south and western tip of southeastern Alaska. Pretty dry weather going into Saturday. And not much changes as you get into Saturday afternoon at all. The dry weather prevails across the Yukon Valley all the way to the Seward Peninsula, Tin City, southward toward Bethel, and then you start to see a few more clouds. Around Bristol Bay, mainly points south, looking at an opportunity for rain and snow. And then we get another frontal boundary. This one's really trying to muster up enough strength to punch into the very stable air mass across the bulk of the state. And so this is making another run at that western periphery, and you see the precipitation lining up right there along that boundary. But that too will probably fall apart as we head into Saturday. So really what you see is what you get as we head into Sunday, most likely. Periods of light rain across southern tip of southeast, Ketchikan and Annette, again just on that corner, the periphery of the control of this high pressure system. So you're going to kind of get grazed with some of the leftovers from anything that's running along the south. Pockets of rain and snow still possible around Kodiak Island, maybe around Homer, just grazing that southern tip of the Kenai. But most likely, it's going to be a partly sunny day for you and a fair weather day for just about all of Alaska heading into the weekend. Let's check temperatures then. In southeast, upper 30s and lower 40s today. Sitka 40, 41 in Juneau, 30s and 40s for southern parts of southeast. Look like Petersburg was holding close to 40 degrees this afternoon. Prince William Sound around Valdez 34, Cordova 41. Seward and Homer both in the lower 40s. Kenai 31 degrees. Look like Anchorage and Talkeetna made it into the mid-30s there. You can see the melting going on all around southern Alaska. For Fairbanks, 27 today. Not too bad around Healy or Greeley, both in the low to mid-20s. Tok was 19. Eagle and Northway both saw temperatures in the 20s. 16 around Fort Yukon, Tanana closer to 20 degrees, 9 in Arctic Village, 7 in Anaktuvuk Pass, and single-digit territory for the Arctic coast. Kaktovik was 1 above. Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse around 0. Wainwright was closer to 5. 26 degrees around Point Lay, Point Hope in the teens. Single digits in teens for Kotzebue Sound. Shishmaref was 7. Kivalina closer to 14 degrees. Nome was in the 20s today. Beautiful day there. 19 in Unalakleet, 25 in McGrath. Areas around Galena also saw temps in the teens today. Bethel showing 20 degrees. 16 in Nunivak Island. Upper teens for St. Lawrence Island. Bristol Bay region in the 20s and 30s with Dillingham at 28. And the Pribilofs today just shy of the freezing point. 31 degrees for both St. Paul and St. George. 30s and 40s for the Kodiak Island area, and 30s and 40s as well for areas around the Alaska Peninsula. Looked like Sandpoint was closer to 36. Unalaska Dutch Harbor at 38, 41 in Adak, and 39 all the way out in Shemian. As we look at low temperatures tonight, remember that clear, dry air does have a consequence when the sun goes down, and we simply drop all of that heat that we gained during the day. So if it was a nice day for you, it's going to cool off fairly quickly tonight with temps anywhere from 5 to 15 below for most areas north of the Alaska Range. And the closer you get to that high pressure system, the colder it's going to be. It looks like 20 below around Arctic Village and Fort Yukon, 16 below around Bettles. Anywhere from 5 to 15 below for the Arctic coast. You'll have a little bit of cloud cover there. Kotzebue Sound temperatures 5 to 10 below, Nome 2 below. Bethel looking at 8 above, teens and 20s for Bristol Bay, the Pribilofs in the upper 20s, and mid-30s for most of the chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak 34, South Central teens and 20s, Southeast looking at 20s and 30s with Juneau around 22 degrees, and highs tomorrow closing in on 40 once again. Prince William Sound temperatures, we'll see Friday afternoon readings close to the freezing point, maybe just shy. About the same there for South Central. Homer and Seward closing in on 40. Same goes for Kodiak. Bristol Bay in the 20s and 30s. Looks like the Alaska Peninsula, including False Pass and Cold Bay, will nudge up on that 40-degree mark. Unalaska Dutch Harbor closing in on 40. 32 in St. Paul, 38 in Shemya. Nome 21. Kivalina and Kotzebue looking at temps in the teens and 20s. It looks like Shishmaref will be closer to 10. Point Hope around 16. Barrow 5. And Kaktovik closing in on 5 degrees as well, with Fairbanks likely near 20 degrees. Northway and Eagle in the upper teens. Flying weather with high pressure in charge, you can expect nothing but VFR conditions for most of the interior. Now, as you look up across the coastal plain, you'll see just offshore there's an opportunity for some MVFR conditions. That's high pressure pushing another boundary of some wetter air closer to the coast. You're going to see that as we head into the weekend. A lot of that will stay in Canada. And across the Bering, pockets of MVFR solidify, mainly south of the ice edge and along the central and western chain. As you get east of Atka a little bit, you're going to run into what's associated with that frontal boundary, and IFR conditions there are expected. Also a wrapping around low pressure in the central and eastern Gulf and along the frontal boundary there. Most of that, again, staying away from southeast with the exception of the extreme southern islands here. May run into some MVFR generally south of Sitka in a line out toward Ketchikan and Annette, and including Kodiak Island. Let's take a look at your passes. Again, you can probably do this with me. VFR conditions for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, of course. And what do you know? Lake Clark and Merrill Pass also listed as visual. Turbulence factor for Rainy Pass with VFR expected, probably not much tomorrow. Windy Pass also expected to be VFR. Isabel Pass, VFR, you got a good guess. Tanita Pass also expected to be visual flight rule throughout your day. The Big Buzzer says Portage is VFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass, of course, expected to be visual. Great job. I knew you could do it. Here's a look at freezing levels, and the surface freezing line really hasn't changed a whole lot since yesterday. Still riding very close to the coastal areas of southeast, south central, and all the way down the Alaska Peninsula, and then just around St. George or so as far as what we're going to expect in the morning. Now, a pretty broad area of a little bit of milder air working its way northward thanks to the storm track being close to the southern waters there of the Gulf of Alaska, but not close enough to really send any major surge of a weather change our way. Icing potential, you're going to find that very close to the frontal structures there, below 8,000 feet from Kodiak Island all the way out toward Haida Gwaii, but mainly away from southeastern Alaska, and a thin strip of light to isolated moderate, generally below 8,000 feet again, where the moisture is associated with that frontal structure, anywhere from the central chain to about Nikolsky or so, and that should be just about it for icing threats tomorrow. The jet stream shows several waves of low pressure associated with that overall flow. Occasionally it stretches out and flattens, and then it becomes a little more ragged in its appearance. But we have several circulations here that are slowing down running into a slower system thanks to high pressure here across the Bering Strait, wrapping into these waves of low pressure. But the main storm track remains well south of Alaska, stretching from eastern Asia all the way into the Pacific Northwest and West Coast. At 9,000 feet, low pressure across the Gulf, showing some faster moving winds at this level from 30 to about 35 knots across the north and eastern coast. In fact, just off of Sitka, a little bit of a speed max tomorrow, so you might run into some turbulence at that level. That's around 50 knots. That's one of the stronger areas of wind across the entire state at this level. Now, across the interior, the wind speeds, even with high pressure, are still kind of zipping along across the interior. You'll notice they run into about 15 to 30 knots here across the mid-Yukon and lower Yukon, across the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knots or so, and then also looking at some stronger winds across the southern Bering between 35 and 40 knots. Now, at 3,000 feet, low pressure still zipping the winds along here across the eastern Gulf. That's running between 15 knots on the inside over the inner channels to about 50 knots just offshore. Things slow down coming over the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound. Light winds across the interior, still up to around 15 knots, but they do slow down a little bit on the east side of the high. And then winds anywhere from east to west across the Bering. And then they pick up again on the western side of low pressure here. This inverted trough working its way into the western Gulf. It's swinging some faster winds out across Adak there around 50 knots and slowing down as you get out towards Shemya. Turbulence then, once again, you could probably figure this out. Close to the frontal structures, we'll have a better chance for some light to isolated moderate, also across the central and eastern chain, running all the way up Kodiak Island, across the northern Gulf, and then just kind of clipping southeastern Alaska with that light to isolated moderate threat. Just offshore of Barrow, maybe just eclipsing it there, below 6,000 feet, you might run into some chop as well with some faster moving winds, mainly offshore. So aviation-wise, things look pretty good across most of Alaska. Not entirely so, but it's mainly going to be the coastal areas that see a little bit of a poor visibility and maybe some light turbulence or icing potential tomorrow. When we come back, we'll take a look at your marine weather forecast. Stay tuned.
The winter hexagon plus Jupiter.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plot Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. Fellow stargazer Marlene Hidalgo will join us to help you find your way around the sky. Spring is right around the corner.
Finally, because now when I go outside to stargaze, it's still freezing.
James, you live in Florida. It's like 80 degrees all the time.
It gets in the 60s sometimes.
Anyway, even though spring is coming, I want us to look back at one humongous star pattern of winter.
Yes, the winter hexagon, covering almost half the sky, incorporating 6 constellations and 8 of the 20 brightest stars visible from Earth. The winter hexagon even has one addition, the planet Jupiter.
So put on your parkas and let's show you the winter hexagon.
Brr. Okay, we have our skies set for 9 p.m. looking southwest. Wow, that's a lot of bright stars in one area.
A ring of sparkling multicolored jewels will shine down on you. Some call this the winter circle or Sirius curve, but we're going to walk you through the stars of the winter hexagon.
That's right, Dean. The main guy who anchors the bottom of the hexagon is Orion the Hunter, easily recognized by the 3 stars that make his snazzy belt. Orion stands slightly tilted about halfway up in the southwestern sky. Marlene, take us in for a closer look.
Orion's brightest stars are Betelgeuse, which is his orange-colored armpit star, and Rigel, his blue-hued left foot. Rigel is one of the bottom corners of the winter hexagon. The 3 belt stars are easy to find and can point you to 2 other corners of the hexagon. Connect the dots of the 3 stars and continue that line to the left. You will run smack dab into the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. Sirius marks the nose of Orion's big dog, Canis Major. Can you see a dog in those stars? If you connect the belt stars and continue the line to the right, you will run into a bright orange star very similar to Betelgeuse. This is Aldebaran, the bullseye, of Taurus the bull, that is. Taurus's face is a small V shape of 5 stars with 2 long horns pointing up.
So we have the bottom of the hexagon covered, Sirius, Rigel, and Aldebaran. The top part is a little trickier since bright Jupiter is also there this year.
Let's bypass Jupiter for the moment to complete the hexagon. Up from Sirius, you'll find bright white Procyon. This is the brightest star in Canis Minor, the little dog.
Aw, he's a cutie. and really hard to imagine. But anyway, the next corner of the winter hexagon has two stars, twin stars.
As in the Gemini twins. Their names are Pollux and Castor. The bright stars mark their heads and their feet come down toward Orion.
Yikes, they're standing on his club. Well, next stop around the hexagon is brilliant Capella. This is the brightest star in Auriga the Charioteer.
Why is he holding goats?
It's a long story, but let's come down the other side of the hexagon and we get back to Rigel again.
That's the winter hexagon. But what about Jupiter? It's even brighter than Sirius and right in the middle of things.
This year, Jupiter is hanging out with the twins, but that's not always the case. Jupiter wanders from night to night across the background stars. It wanders really, really slowly, but over the course of a few months or a year, then you can really tell the difference. Last year, at the exact same date and time, the stars were in the exact same locations. Jupiter, however, was over in Taurus. Fast forward to this year, and Jupiter is in Gemini. That's a big jump. Next year, it will be in Cancer the Crab. If those constellations sound especially familiar, that's because they are all zodiac constellations. Jupiter takes about 12 years to go around the sun, and so it spends about 1 year in each of the 12 zodiac constellations.
So even in the warmer nights of spring, you can behold the bright stars of the winter hexagon.
Sirius, Rigel, and Aldebaran along the bottom.
Procyon, Pollux, Castor, and Capella along the top.
And bright old Jupiter hanging out at the Gemini twins' feet. Keep looking up.
Great news if you do want to do some stargazing tonight, or perhaps some aurora viewing if you're lucky. The interior, great place to be as always, but more parts of the state are going to be probably completely clear tonight and the next couple nights into the weekend. So get out your stargazing materials and have a good time. See Ice Edge, here you go from yesterday, weather.gov/ice.php, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice.php will get you to the tools you need to make this type of map. The Ice Edge about 35 to 45 nautical miles north of St. Paul, but again, that's strips, and it looks like with more of those southerly winds and more of an east to westerly flow, that's going to stay as strips and maybe even lift northward just a little bit over the coming days. So again, what you see is probably what you get. Still looking at some light ice concentrations across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet. As far as southeast goes, no ice to contend with there, but a little bit of stronger winds, mainly an offshore flow in the north, more of a flow running parallel to the coastline in the south, up to 30-knot winds there, bringing anywhere from 11 to 13-foot seas. Some of this coming up in the morning. Northerlies in the Lynn Canal at 35 knots, 5 to 7-foot seas there. Southeasterly winds in the southern inner channels, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. By Sunday, a lot of the coastal winds are diminishing just a little bit there, but you'll notice the winds across the inner passages picking up 20 to 35 knots. The strongest winds, of course, in the Lynn Canal, 6-foot seas around Frederick Sound and Stevens Passage, and southeasterlies keeping winds up around the Clarence and Chatham Strait, around 4-foot seas expected there, with seas still running between 10 to 11 feet across the coastal areas by Saturday. Across south central, the west and northern Gulf Coast looking at 30-knot winds with 11 to 14-foot seas as you get down toward the eastern side of Kodiak. Around the Cook Inlet into Shelikof Strait, 20 to 35-knot winds from the north and northeast. Seas ranging from 5 feet in the north and the ice-free areas to 13 feet in the Shelikof Strait region. Inside Prince William Sound, a northeasterly wind will blow at 15 knots, dropping to 10 by Saturday. Northeasterlies continue down the coast, but we start to see some variations there. More of an east to westerly wind coming into the Barren Islands, and easterlies coming into Kodiak Island around 30 knots with a 14-foot sea. South and west of Kenai, you're looking at 25-knot winds with a 9-foot sea from the north and east. On Friday in the Alaska Peninsula, a northeasterly wind sweeping across the entire region, looking at 3 to 6-foot seas on the Bering side, 10 to 12-foot seas on the Pacific side. There's some freezing spray, still an issue as we get into Saturday. We see a little bit of a shift in the wind north of Cold Bay there and outside of Bristol Bay. Seas still running around 4 feet with that northeasterly flow up to 25 knots. It diminishes somewhat south of Sandpoint. Across the chain on Friday, a relatively light and variable flow across the western islands, more of a northerly flow coming across Attu with 11-foot seas, 15-foot seas around Kiska. Northerlies cutting across the central chain, and then an easterly flow coming into that. From Unalaska to Nikolsky, you're looking at 20 to 30 knot winds, 8 to 9 foot seas on the north side, and 12 to 15 foot seas on the Pacific side. By Saturday, the winds are picking up in the west again, up to 35 knots with higher gusts there. We'll keep our general easterly flow coming into the eastern and central part of the chain between 15 and 20 knots with up to 12 foot seas south of Unalaska and Nikolsky, and 6 to 7 foot seas on the Bering side. For the west, an offshore flow for most areas from the mainland, so it means dry weather and by and large, and again, that's coming across the ice edge, which we've got painted in now for the Kuskokwim Bay area. You're looking at northeasterlies at 25 knots, easterly flow across the Pribilofs with an 8-foot sea. And by Saturday, expect still an offshore flow. That means 15 to 20 knots in the north and 20 to 25 knots in the south with 6-foot seas holding around the Pribilofs for Saturday. And across the Arctic coast, a southerly flow continues over the Bering Strait and into the Arctic at 15 to 20 knots or so with more of a west to easterly flow from Barrow to Kaktovik. And as we get into Saturday, not a whole lot changes. The wind's still running around 10 to 15 knots in all areas. Still looking at a southeasterly flow inside Kotzebue Sound on Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, severe clear for most areas in the interior. You may see some low clouds across the coastal plain cutting into the Kotzebue Sound region. Still looks pretty dry there. A frontal boundary working its way into the Bering will create scattered rain and snow showers across the southern Bering. Maybe some brief stronger winds across the central and eastern chain, but nothing significant. Periods of snow possible for Kodiak Island and the southern tip of the Seward or the Kenai Peninsula, with areas across southeast maybe seeing a scattered snow shower or two. The bulk of the precipitation stays over the Gulf. That frontal boundary closes in a little bit more on Friday, but weakens as it does so. Not a significant area of rain and snow except for some coastal areas that might get wet, and some snow pockets there for Kodiak Island with periods of rain and snow for the central chain. High pressure still in charge right over Fort Yukon. By Saturday, more of the same. Periods of rain and snow still possible for Kodiak, southern southeast, and a new storm in the west. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.